My name is Stacey Corriveau and I'm the Director of the BC Centre for Social Enterprise. I'm going to chat a little bit, give you a brief introduction about social enterprise. We're calling this Social Enterprise 101. The focus of this presentation is community-based social enterprises. So that is businesses that are operated by charities, nonprofit organizations, and cooperatives. It's important to note that social enterprise is not a legal expression in Canada. So we can't go to a Federal Income Tax Act or a piece of Canada Revenue Agency guidance and learn what social enterprise is to determine whether or not we fit within those paradigms. We can't find this phrase within the Income Tax Act, within any piece of government legislation or regulation. So for now, it's up to us to make up our own definition based on the actual practices of social enterprises within Canada. This is a great definition. We've seen many. There are about as many definitions of social enterprise as there are social enterprise practitioners. The debate has been raging for years in terms of defining this once and for all. I think this is a good definition because it captures a broad range of activity. Social enterprise is defined as any organization or business that uses market-oriented production and sale of goods and or services to pursue a public benefit mission. And I think what's particularly interesting about this definition is that it doesn't define who owns the enterprise. So it doesn't say you must be a nonprofit to have a social enterprise. It's more concerned with the impacts than the ownership. And I'm heartened by this definition and hope that we can move forward on this track. In terms of impacts, and these are conservative numbers, we're looking at over $3.5 billion annually in Canada and approximately 1/5 of the revenue that's coming in through the nonprofit sector. I include this survey, although it is Western Canada, it's BC and Alberta, and it was performed in 2010. And the sample number is quite low. They've only polled 140 social enterprises. I think it's a good illustration of the reasons why an organization might get involved in social enterprise. So that's the first part of the slide. You'll see that 43% are operating their enterprise motivated by mission. About 1/3 are operating an enterprise to create training and employment opportunities, mostly for folks who are typically excluded from the mainstream economy. And most importantly, I think, notably, you see that nearly 1/4 exist to generate profit for the parent agency. Now, this group they are a bit of a black sheep group within the sector. They report being shamed by their colleagues because they're only out for profit, and they're feeling pressured to add an additional bottom line to their operations. So I say there's no shame in this because the profit is going back to the parent agency to enable them to do more of their community good. So in fact, there is a multiple bottom line there. It just isn't within the actual structure of the social enterprise itself. The second piece here is a little bit confusing. When they asked the organizations what their legal structures were, there were multiple responses. So this does not add to 100%. For example, you can have a charity that is also a nonprofit. You can have a nonprofit cooperative, so we had multiple responses here. But you'll see that of those polled, over 1/5 were inhabiting for-profit legal structures. And we'll talk about the legal landscape in another section of these talks. This is some data from an Ontario survey, social finance census, that was performed in 2010, and I've pulled out some of the more interesting numbers. And this is also quite a small sample, 196 nonprofit organizations, so not necessarily social enterprises. But you can see that nearly half of those who responded to the survey are already engaged in social enterprise activity. 1/3 of those remaining are primed to get into the field within the next 2 years. So a growing trend here, obviously. Interestingly enough, 1/4 of the social enterprises polled have been in existence Oh, I should say, a quarter of the social enterprises polled bring in more than 50% of the revenue for the parent agency. So that is a huge number. And what I was getting to earlier is that 20% have been on the scene for over 25 years. So you have a whole cluster of enterprises that we think thrift stores that have been operating for quite some time. And on the other end of the spectrum, 1 in 3 has launched within the past 2 years. So you have a very new group and an established group as well. So I wanted to just give some illustrative examples of my own experience so that you can get a taste of the wide range of social enterprise activity that exists in Canada. So these are all BC, British Columbia examples because that's where I'm based, but I think you would find similar ones in Ontario and across Canada. So the first is a pretty typical farmers market. So why is that a social enterprise? This farmers market, the Abbotsford Farm and Country Market, has 2 different client streams. The first one is the rental of booth space to farmers, small food producers, and artisans. And also the market itself has what I call a merch booth. We have a great logo, which I'm showing you here, and people love to buy the market bags, the t-shirts, postcards that have this logo. Selling the market bags had an interesting collateral effect. This market was intended as a downtown revitalization project, and we can see by people carrying those bags that when they go into local merchants, that those are market clients. So we have brought those people to the downtown. Inside Art Cooperative clearly is a co-op, and I'll say also that the Farmers Market is a nonprofit organization, so we have some different legal structures at play. The co-op was quite an innovative one. It was set up within the federal prison system as a vehicle to help inmates market their artwork. So they, of course, don't have a means. They can't sell their art through the internet. They can't go out and do craft shows. So this cooperative acted as a vehicle to do that on their behalf. So within this structure, they were each making their own art as self-employed artists, but they were using this single vehicle as a way to get it out there. And this was a nonprofit cooperative. We fought really hard for our tax exemption, so that's a whole other story. Claiborne Village Community Society is a registered charity. Claiborne Village is where I live. It's a heritage village. It's the oldest industrial town in BC and was built up around a brickworks. This society owns some property within the village. One is a heritage schoolhouse, the other is a heritage church, plus there's a park that we own. So we don't use these buildings all the time, so what we do to generate revenue is rent the buildings out specifically for events such as weddings, because we have the church and the hall combo. So that brings in probably about 30% of our gross revenues just by doing that. Completely volunteer run, and we farm the work of management out to another company, and they just take a 25% commission. So it's no cost to the society if the place isn't rented out. So those are just some close to home examples. I also wanted to share some examples of some clients that I've been working with over the past 8 months or so to kind of spread out a bit. Revive, exclamation mark, it has to have the exclamation mark, is a planned social enterprise of a registered charity that specializes in transition housing services for women. They were interested in the thrift store because they were already getting tons of donations from the community in order to support their women, and they actually had so many donations that they're starting to fill garages and storage spaces, and really high quality donations. They also have a troupe of really passionate volunteers who are eager to start a thrift store. So in terms of a business, they already have their free inventory and their free labor. The twist on this is that Revive will not be a stereotypical poverty alleviation type of thrift store. The goal is for it to be truly triple bottom line and integrate a green perspective. So the whole point is higher quality, higher cost items with the goal of educating folks about the importance of landfill diversion. So whenever they purchase something from this Revive store, which will be fresh and bright and fun, they are not only donating to this charity, they are helping the environment. So true triple bottom line, social, financial, and environmental embedded within this enterprise. And this group had built a social enterprise fund within their own organization over a number of years, so they are going to self-invest in order to open that store, and that's in Langley, British Columbia. EcoWorks is quite an interesting one. It is a social enterprise that belongs to another registered charity, quite a large one, called Mennonite Central Committee. It does great work in British Columbia. They started out as a training and employment project for youth, and they started with stream remediation and trail building, and basically were going with the flow in terms of the government funding that was available to support training programs. But then they hit on a sustainable winner, and that was a landscaping maintenance and design company. So they have moved from a training business, which can be safely operated within a charity, to a completely taxable corporation that's been hived off because they're profiting, and the profits are being fed back into the parent agency. So not only are they providing training and employment opportunities, they are generating huge profits for the parent. And you rarely see those two mandates happening at the same time, and I'll talk about that in the next segment. The next and last example is the Maples Discovery Gardens Cooperative. This is a nonprofit co-op, and it exists to provide education around agriculture and community gardens. And they are now looking at a three-pronged business line social enterprise. That is the community gardens itself, selling the produce that they're growing, and providing education workshops such as on the topic of permaculture, which is their next one. So they have three business lines happening. It's all embedded within the same cooperative. So I just wanted to quickly go over some general points in terms of what is a social enterprise, what are the features that we tend to see within them. So first of all, it's a business. It's not a program. It's not a file off the side of your desk. It is an actual business that's selling a good or service into the marketplace. So that would be the first test. If you're wondering whether you have a social enterprise, ask that simple question. Secondly, I've already covered, it's offering good or services into the marketplace. A social enterprise can be made or bought, and by that I mean you could start an enterprise from scratch, or you could, for instance, purchase a franchise, or maybe there's a local business that is shutting down and you'd like to move in and purchase it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be built from scratch. Multiple bottom lines I've already talked about. We're now talking about 4 bottom lines. They are the financial bottom line, the social, the environmental, and sometimes cultural bottom lines as well. It's a possible solution for long-term sustainability of the parent organization, but I need to stress it's not a quick fix. So for instance, I have groups coming to me, they're about to lose their core funding, they don't want to lay off their people, let's start a social enterprise. Well, probably this isn't the right point in your organization's development to be thinking about launching a business. So the numbers being thrown around, and it's different for every enterprise, is that it takes between 5 and 7 years for a social enterprise to break even. So it's not a quick fix, and that 5 to 7 years is completely dependent on, of course, the specific details of your own enterprise. And I think it goes without saying that the enterprise requires full board and decision maker buy-in. So I've seen some situations where there's some real tensions. There may be a board that is hugely opposed to taking the risk involved in a social enterprise, but the staff has done all of the research and gone to the workshops, and they're really gung-ho. So that's one of the real first pieces before moving forward, is making sure that you have a cohesive opinion about whether or not you should proceed with social enterprise development. In terms of benefits, your social enterprise need not hit all of these points. This is just a list. So it could be 1, 2, or more of these. So as we saw earlier, about a third of the social enterprise are devoted to creating training and employment opportunities for folks. Perhaps you might see that there is a gap in the marketplace in terms of a needed good or service that is not being provided. A social enterprise can work in that situation as well. Perhaps the agency is just sick and tired of proposal writing and endless grants with short-term, huge deliverables, and they want to be more self-determining. That would be another motivation. And the agencies may feel that the funders are controlling the delivery of services a little bit more than they would like to see, and they would like to be more resonant with community needs. So that would be another reason to start generating revenue for yourself and not be relying on the dictates of others. So that's a quick summary of Social Enterprise 101.